So, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. This is the legend that is Ian McGill, who's going to share his story with you today, live in the Digital Brew. So this will be going out on YouTube and Facebook later today for some of those who've missed it this time round. So, Ian, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your amazing story?
Okay, so my name's Ian McGill. My company name is onyourmarks.solutions. I'm a transformational coach, and I want to tell you my story which led me to this point in my life. But I want to start with, if anybody wants to turn off their cameras or wants to leave, I'm okay with that. It's just me talking to anybody that wants to listen. The starting point for me is to get across that right now is I'm at the best place, the most vulnerable place in my life, but the best place. Vulnerable financially, emotionally, and for years when I talk about my story, I thought I had to be strong. So really what I'm saying here is, coming from a great place, I've got gratitude, I've got love in my life, I've got a great family, I've got self-love for the first time in my life as well. So the last 2 years, I've come from a place of truth and being authentic. And for me, it's really important that I realise that it's not circumstance that makes me happy or anyone happy. Circumstance can't make you sad or happy. Your happiness comes from within. So I just want to start off with a sort of positive quote, and I have to pre-warn you, I am going to read one of my poems, but I've done it in a way that I'll give you 2 verses at a time, which is relevant to my story as well. But I'm just going to read this. This is a book that I can recommend to anybody, and it's called Stop Thinking and Start Living. Because sometimes when we think we're not confident, or we think that we're not good enough, or we think that we're insecure, it is just a thought, it isn't real. So this sums up where I'm at this moment in time. There is so much in life that I can't control. The world, other people, and their choices and reactions. Accidents, imperfections, suffering, hardships. Yet this is my life, and regardless of what happens, I'm going to be happy. And there's a little caveat. I highlighted that 16 years ago. There's a little caveat at the bottom which is relevant to where we are with COVID at the moment, and maybe the lockdown. Being happy isn't always easy. In fact, it can be one of the greatest challenges in life. True maturity means taking responsibility for our own happiness right now. It means choosing to concentrate on what we have instead of what we lack. And that's very relevant at this moment in time. We talk about the COVID thing and the lockdown, how it affects us, but actually it's just our thinking about that. So what I want to do is just read 2 verses of my poem, and this will pre-frame what I'm going to talk about, because this is really about my relationship in the past with loss or grief. And one of the reasons I'm a transformational coach now is to help people stop being stuck on things that, are made up really. You make up things. There's sadness in life, there's happiness in life, but you make up the thoughts around it, which then will affect your behavior. So it's sort of like circumstance will then drive your thoughts, which then drive your feelings, which then drive your behavior. Once you realize that circumstance doesn't have to do that, it's the way you think about it, then maybe your life can change. It certainly has changed for me. So I wrote a poem on my son's birthday, 25th of September. It's called Chasing Cars. I've taken that, I think it's from Snow Patrol, but it's a song that was relevant to me. So the first 2 verses, I'm just going to read this at the beginning and I'll finish it as I go through. To mark my loss of grief is so good. Renewal of life can combat dark mood. My love will endure for all time and a day. These words are so hard for me to say. But the joy that I feel in knowing you, son, in this world too briefly, now vanished and gone. The pain and the sadness mirror my love. The anger wanes pale like the moon far above. The ceaseless search for my lost sense of me. I don't want your sorry, nor yet your pity. I will conquer this trial, no more the victim. This life is for living, it can't be for him. So I want to start by saying that my relationship with grief started a long time ago, and it was the absence of it. When I was younger, I was always seemed to be on holiday when my friends' fathers died or people died. I never really got exposed to grief, and I didn't have any sort of training on it, if that's a thing you have on grief or loss. So I didn't really believe it. And that was cemented. If I go back to talking about my older sister was given, she had terminal cancer, and she was given 2 weeks to live. And on the second week of that 2 weeks, when she was on death's door, trust me. On that second week, her husband went back to Saudi Arabia. We didn't understand that. He said, there's nothing I can do here, but he went back to Saudi Arabia because where he was working, I can do more by earning money. And in that second week, we got news. I seen my dad, he was full of tears, and I thought my sister had passed. I remember going to the house, we had a vigil around her, 24-hour vigil. And my dad was in tears. I'd never really seen my dad in tears before. And I thought Glenda had gone, but it wasn't. He said, it's not Glenda, it's Jimmy, her husband. He's been in a car accident in Saudi Arabia and he's died. So we had a difficult decision, like we have in life, difficult decisions to whether to tell my sister or not. Because, we thought she only had a week to go. But we made that decision. My parents and I were there. We were actually in the house looking after her. And we whispered in her ear to tell her that her husband had died. And she made a decision that impacted on her life and everyone's life, because she got up and she stopped taking the painkillers, which is what really kills you in the end anyway. And she went through the pain, and she lasted for another 30 years. So to me, people don't die, they come back from dying. So that set my framework out, that I thought, okay, fair enough. And my sister came back, and she lived her life to the full for another 30 years. Another thing happened years later. I had a brother in the SAS, I have a brother in the SAS, and he was captured in the 91 war, Q80 war. He was captured, and we got told, the helicopters flew in from the brass at the SAS headquarters and told my dad and my mum that my brother was dead, been killed in action. So for 3 weeks we mourned, and I remember going down to see his wife and daughter just to console them. And because I looked like my brother, it sort of freaked them out a little bit. But and they offered, his wife offered me some cufflinks, and the reason I'm telling you this is because it's quite a funny story. She offered me these cufflinks that were my brother's, and I used to think, oh, this is great, at least I've got some part of him, because for weeks we thought his body was lost and all this sort of thing. And I had these cufflinks, and then 3 weeks later we got a phone call from the Red Cross saying that Billy was alive. He had been shot in the leg. An Iraqi surgeon saved his leg by putting £10,000 worth of titanium in it, and he like a lot of people who were prisoners of war, he got taken out, he got brought back. But I wouldn't believe this, because again, somebody's died and come back to life again in my books. So my relationship with grief was still iffy. But the funny thing was, when I went to see my brother, I let my dad go first. He gave him a hug. He was in his bed. I let my mum go first, give a hug, big hug, and let my sister, the one that I was talking about earlier, she went and gave him a hug. And then I went in for the sort of the hug, male to male, and went in for the big sort of hug. And he just whispered in my ear, and he says, excuse my swearing, but I'll try and dress it down a bit. He leant in and he went, "Where's my fucking cufflinks?" And I thought, oh, okay. And I said, well, I got them to remind me because I thought you were dead. And he said, well, I'm not dead now. And he took them back. And he took them back off me, which is fair enough. And he lost them years later when he was drunk. He pinged them off one of his shirts. So, but I just thought it was hilarious that he took them back off me. So that up to now, I've just tried to paint a picture that I just don't believe people die, and I've never been exposed to it. And as a family, we rolled on. And I say rolled on because I think of it like a wagon wheel. Like the old Western wagon wheels with spokes in. And my dad was the outer ring. holding it all together, this Glaswegian stoic engineer. And the hub of the family was my mum. My mum was the biggest heart ever. She was pretty much partially blind all her life, if not full blind in the end. But she held us all together. She was like an amazing woman, you know. My dad was strong, stoic. My mum was amazing heart. Everybody loved her. So my first taste of grief was when we lost the outer ring. And we lost my dad. And my response to that was to be strong, because I'd just been promoted to operations director at the company that I was in, a packaging company. And my response to losing my dad was obviously sadness, mourning. And some people can't do that now because of COVID, you know, having a send-off. But my coping mechanism was I can't let this, because I'd just been promoted a month earlier to this job. I have to do my job. And I spent 18 months doing my job. And I didn't really come to terms with what grief means, you know, the anger, the guilt, and all the things that go on. And in that being strong, obviously it comes out. It eventually comes out. I eventually left that job to go and work on my own, or in partnership, but I suppressed all the anger, I suppressed all the guilt. So wrong to be strong in that instance. But the real test came when we lost the hub a few years later. And when I lost my mother, that's when grief hit. And I had a young family. I was in a relationship. It wasn't a supported relationship as it should have been. That's what I would say. But losing my mother was it. There was no hiding. There was no coming back from this. So my story really is I sorted out. I tried to sort out everybody else by being strong for them. So we had all the family. So the family, where it was a wagon wheel, and we lost the outer ring, we clunked along. But when we lost the hub, there was no rolling along now. There was no wheel to roll. And that's the symbol of the rainbow. Because there's 7 of us in our family, we all sort of, the spokes became layered upon layer. There's seven colours of the rainbow. And we held rainbow parties, and we have held rainbow parties every 2 years to celebrate my mum and dad's life, and Glenda's now as well. And a little story about that is when we had the first rainbow party, a rainbow came out on the day. It was in Herefordshire, so there was a good chance of that. On the second rainbow party, 2 rainbows come out. On the third rainbow party, there wasn't 3 rainbows, but there was a rainbow. Symbolic, something to hang on to, something to galvanise family love, and also remembering my parents. But the true test for me was when I lost my son. My son died in a road traffic accident. He was going to see the Arctic monkeys in Nottingham. He had a driver also called Mark, who was his friend, and there was 5 people in the car. 3 died. Instantly they died, which was a blessing. But the thing we did, I wasn't with the mother of my son at the time, but I've grown closer together because of this. And I've got 4 children, or had 4 children, there's 3 now. And the first thing we decided to do was to get the driver of the car, who survived with minimum scratches, and we brought him into our home the very next day and forgave him, because that's what my son would have wanted, and that's what we wanted. And I remember my son died on 31st of January, and I remember being trialed and tested all this time, because you now forgive somebody, and now you've got a massive loss, and grief is just love with nowhere to go. And I focused on the circumstance of losing someone, so I became a victim of that circumstance, and I had the label of I'm a grieving father, and my life got stuck in that, being strong and thinking I was a grieving father and nothing else. And the thing I remember the most was what's the point? What's the point of anything? What's the point of going to work? Which I did. I carried on working. I've never lost a day off work. But what's the point? There was always that question, and it's very. I call it being stuck. And I became a coach in 2014 because I didn't want people to be stuck, whether it's loss of loss of a loved one, or loss of a job, or loss of a relationship. It's once you delve into what you're about and you come from a place of self-love, then you can give more. You can give the gratitude, you can give the forgiveness. And I really feel strong about that now, but didn't feel back then. And there's I became a member of an exclusive club, and I remember trying not to be like a leper. You know, people avoiding you, crossing the street, not wanting to talk to you. So I never ever ignore people who are grieving or struggling. I always reach out to them. And I did ask myself a question. That part of the journey was I started on doing an NLP Masters, which really just gave me the time and the quiet of mind to have an insight about self-love. But it still wasn't enough. I still was staying strong. And it was only 2 years ago that I actually cried for 30 minutes for my son. And it was like a release that I realised that that was the thing to do. Letting go of anything in life is always best. And I liken it to like I was hanging from the ceiling, you know, by my shoulders like a marionette, and I was floating around. My feet were not on the ground, and I wasn't being authentic. I was doing things for other people and not myself. I was being strong for other people and not myself. And then I had this insight called aliveness. You know, aliveness means different things to different people, but for me, years ago when my son was taken from me, somehow I had a belief, a thought that said, I can't have aliveness because he can't. And I followed that through. And this insight just happened to me. And as soon as it happened, I just hit the ground. And it happened in London. I was actually on a course. And my stake got broken by a fox running across the road, nearly getting run over. But it was instant tears, instant insight. And it changed my life forever 2 years ago. About the fact that it doesn't matter what happens in life now, the circumstance will not change my inner glow, my inner happiness. And it's them learnings that I've taken that have helped me now. I mean, this COVID thing is really not even fazed me one bit. Not one bit. Because you just logistically react to it. I mean, everybody's looking after the businesses, which is logistics. But what I think David mentioned it earlier about your mind and your body. Your mind has to be in a good place, and once you get wrapped up in your contaminated or conditioned thoughts, then that will shape your behavior, and you don't have to do it. What I do now, and it's the best way I can say it, is I show up and I notice how I feel, not what I think, but how I feel. And if a thought comes into your head and it has a good feeling, then it's good. And I sort of, given a computer term, I defragged my brain 80%, which enabled me about 2 years ago to start writing poetry. And I don't know where it came from. I didn't think I was creative, and I just wrote it. And I don't know. Sometimes I have to read it, and I don't recognize it. So just on that note, I'll read the next 2 verses. If you switch off now, that would be good critique. And this is about staying strong. So it's still called Chasing Cars. Take solace in life through being with others. His mother, his sister, both of his brothers. We miss him so deeply, the pain is intense. The challenge at first, appearing immense. New memories created in sorrow's dim light. No rules with such grief, just hope to do right. Clinging on to the shreds of my strength. Talking about him often at length. Nothing will fade the emotional scars. A song to remind me was Chasing Cars. If I just lay here, would you lie with me? Tears spilling hot till I no longer could see. So, I don't know if that makes me a legend because I've been through a lot of grief in a short time, and it doesn't make me a legend because maybe I wasn't prepared for that. I don't know. Everybody will have a different level of preparation for it. But the one thing I know, going forward, I've got a full life ahead of me of aliveness, and it doesn't matter what the circumstance is. You still can be sad, you can still have anger, you can still have all the emotions, but it's really about understanding that it's not the circumstance, it's your thoughts about the circumstance that create your feelings. And if you can catch them and notice them thoughts, and just there's a analogy I like, that it's like leaves floating past on a river. There's loads of thoughts going past like leaves on a river, and it's only the ones you focus on or the ones you pick up that are going to create that behavior or that emotion or that feeling. So I've went from, in my journey, from what's the point to wonder. I wonder about what life will bring from now on, and I feel poised now to have that in my life. And I just want to finish on the last 2 verses. I'm indulging myself because it's a little bit more about where I'm at now. All of this now seems so long ago, but I still feel triggered to put on a show. What will it be? Anger, frustration, or guilt? The emotional dagger stabs deep to the hilt. I realise now that my egoist thinking that stops me ascending and keeps me still sinking. Now, in good time, my awareness has peaked. Far beyond truth, the unknown has leaked. To not know the answer is shockingly pleasing. Each minute is present, my sorrow is easing. Remain in this feeling without further words. Ignoring life's wonder is sadly absurd. I think I want to stop now.
No, but thank you, mate.
For listening.
I mean that I didn't ask any questions through any of that because I think your story is amazing and your journey you've been on is phenomenal. I think in the current climate, lots of people. There's a saying by Napoleon Hill. It's one of my favourite sayings, which is, "From every adversity comes the seed of equal or greater opportunity." And obviously, in the current climate, lots of people, this is going to be their first time that they've actually had any true adversity. And there's probably nobody in the world now who doesn't know someone or who hasn't been affected by what's going on around us. And I said before, and I said to a few people, that it's a little bit like COVID-19 is sort of like everybody's cancer, in the way that most people who have had an adversity or cancer or anything, have overcome anything, they get an inner peace because they've slowed down anyway and looked at life and stepped back and just taken in not just the rush but the world and the family. And I think COVID-19 has slowed everybody down to enjoy the little things and reflect on previous sort of positives. What advice, or one piece of advice, would you give someone, maybe a young person now or somebody who is going through grief now? Because with COVID-19 as well, it's been very difficult for a number of people not being able to see their loved ones, for them to move on. And you said about the rainbows as well, appearing on your rainbow parties, which, you know, that's amazing, because I generally believe that there is more than just this world. What piece of advice would you give somebody who might be going through grief now to help them come through this?
I think, going back to my point about letting go, I'm not saying that it's not sad. It's okay to have sadness. I wrote another poem about sadness is not a loner. Sadness, the emotion of sadness is not a loner. And what that means is it comes along with guilt, anger, frustration. I mean, so guilt of not saying goodbye. And to hold on to that guilt will be the thing that does the most damage. In fact, the sadder you are, the more reflection it is of the love that you had for that person. You know, I really love my son, and so there's a lot of sadness. I really love my mum and my dad, so there's a lot of sadness. And like everybody does, everybody has that relationship with your family. So the best advice I can give, and what I've gone to, it might not have worked right at the start, because you're in the grief cycle is about denial and shock and all them sort of things. But the best advice, and when I look back at the things that we did, like even just deciding on what song to have at my son's funeral, my kids picked that. You know, it was like a remix of a song. But it's just to stay in the moment, be completely present in the moment. And so the tagline for me is feel it to heal it.
Okay.
So, and if you, but you can only do anything with the present moment. You know, if you start worrying about the future, you get anxiety. If you start looking at the past, then you get other emotions that are not serving you based on whatever you're looking back at. But actually, in the moment is when you can actually heal and do things. You know, like I say, kindness, forgiveness, being grateful about just the fact that things goes on. And the best thing I can get is, you know, to your point that you said earlier on, energy never dies. My son's not gone anywhere, and I will see him again. I know that.
And do you
Highest authority.
do you now did you do poetry before all this, or is this something that you did post all of this?
Oh, I've told myself that I'm not creative. I've told myself another thought, another belief. I've told myself I have no creative, because I thought to be creative you have to sing, dance, draw pictures. And I've always been, I love words, but I've never written anything. I think I wrote something as an operation director for Christmas ditty or something, and everybody sort of laughed at me for it. And the 12 Days of Christmas. But no, it came from no. Well, it came from a quiet mind. When I talk about a quiet mind, that means just ignoring all the thoughts that give you like things like imposter syndrome, or tell you you're not good enough, or tell you, you know, you've had an argument with somebody, so therefore they don't love you. That's just thought. Just thought. It's not real. Thought. It's when you believe thoughts are real, then that's when you get into trouble, because you're working on your conditioning. You're working on your contaminated thoughts. I call it the shitty committee. You know, that voice in your head that tells you that, you know, don't do this, don't do that. But your own wisdom, I suppose what I'm trying to say is, think about Rory, right? When you look at Rory, babies are born happy. We're all born happy. We're all born with innate wisdom, innate well-being. Our true nature is to be happy. What we do is we then coat it with all the things that life chuck at us. And I thought, so my catch line, because I was a resilience consultant, my catch line really about my grief was, I said bouncing back from grief. But you don't have to bounce back. I'll change it now to, because resilience is inside you, so you don't bounce back, you've always got it, you just put layers on top of it. But for me, it's like I came home. I was a very playful boy, you know, all the things you did as a kid was all about play and fun and laughter. And I didn't get any indication that it wasn't that until quite late on in my life, you know, by losing people. And I've come back to that playfulness, that playful boy. I am completely childlike in my approach now to live in every moment. When I got self-love, it was like I'll give it in my stomach never churns now. You know, just even doing this talk, I just thought, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to show up and notice how it feels. You know, the only preparation I did was with the camera, and I've read a couple of things that I've written before, but I could have gone on more. But
well, it's the first interview I haven't asked any questions or anything really, because I thought it was a great story, and I think I know we talked about this in the brew previously last week, and I've said it a lot to the cancer groups that I'm part of, that it's 90% positive mindset and 10% Netflix. Now I said Netflix because it's escapism, because actually the worst place for a lot of people is in their own head, worrying about a problem that hasn't happened or something that didn't, you know. And that, I think when you get your inner peace, you don't have the regrets to stuff, and then you just look at life and you enjoy what you've had and what you're going to do going forward. And I think, when I was in the fire brigade, we used to see a lot of road traffic accidents, and we used to detach ourselves from the individuals or get a dark humour, because that was a coping mechanism there. And I think with COVID-19, what's quite hard, I think, is that all of the NHS staff who are seeing everybody there, they can't not be attached because they're the ones helping and talking and cuddling, and for them that would be really hard, like really hard. Like in the fire brigade, you took your uniform off, you joked, you went home, you moved on. The nurses, the doctors, I mean, their mindsets right now in this current climate is going to be really hard because they're seeing people, engaging with people. What advice would you give those key workers in this scenario?
The only advice I can give, and it's going to be difficult for them depending on, is that they focus when they can on their self-care. It's almost like it's like energy being transferred by osmosis. You know, if you're hanging around people that are ill and dying, and you're accepting the energy, but you're not grounded, or you're not doing anything to recharge that energy. And the best way to recharge it is to understand what you need for self-care. So I can give an example. I had a friend. I was actually best man when I was 17 at a wedding, and my friend died. My best friend died. He didn't make the story. You'll have me for that. But his wife later on, she was in Australia. She came back from Australia, and I connected up with her because I knew, and it might be play a part actually. I knew that I needed to connect up for some reason, and I coached her for a little bit about my best friend Gary. And that's not why we got together. I don't think that's why we got together. She wrote poetry, funny enough, and she told me that she was writing poetry, so she sort of showed me, and that was a little bit of a trigger to me get my feelings down into poems. But sadly she got terminal cancer, and I couldn't even do this to my own sister when she did finally pass 30 years on. I struggle because I'm a bit of an empath. Well, I don't know what an empath is, but I really struggle to look at people when they're on the way out, let's say. But I was able to sit with this my friend's wife or ex-wife when she was like 2 weeks away from dying, and I just sat and I spoke to her. I didn't see the frail 4.5 stone body. What I seen was these big eyes that were full of wonderment, love, and the love of her family. And it didn't make me sad. I just didn't attach to it in the same way. And that's because I wasn't putting me in the picture. I wasn't in it. I was there because it was the right thing to do.
And I think that is definitely what all the sort of nurses and doctors are doing, isn't it? They all come into this and actually they're propping up the whole country. And I know I've got a lot of friends who are nurses and doctors and things, and when we were in, because we stayed in hospital for 24 hours last week whilst this was all going on with my daughter, and the nurses and the doctors were amazing, but the nurses were saying that the doctors are doing 14-16 hour shifts and that they're working so hard right now. Ian, thank you ever so much. I'm going to unmute everybody in the brew who's with us. And is it okay to share this in the group?
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll share this.
It's fine. Thank you to everyone for listening. I don't know how it landed. By all means, you can ask questions or sort of say what you feel. But,
well, I'm gonna unmute them all. No, you're a total legend. For me, overcoming the adversity that you have with your son. For me, that would be something that I'm not a negative person. I very much push through. I'm positive all the time. But when I left the fire brigade as a retained firefighter when my son was born, because he became my reality check. Because I didn't want to keep seeing children passing away or the people that I did. I didn't need that reality check. So my world changed then, and for me it's something that I don't know how I would overcome that, and I know you never overcome anything, but I think I just don't think I'd ever speak. I don't know, and for me the fact that you have overcome and all the things you've gone through is just phenomenal. From one dad to another, I just think that's amazing. There's a guy, Chris Curry as well, a charity called Neve's Next Step, and that's an amazing charity, and he's an amazing guy doing the things that he's doing, and I have to actually get Chris on at some point. But I'm gonna stop this and then I'm gonna unmute everyone, because this has obviously been recording, so bear with me a second, and catch you all later. And that's just for the viewers. Catch you all later at the next room. We've got some great interviews coming up, and people that we're going to be sharing their stories and successes from all over the globe. Have a great one and take care.